state came into being in 1889, and of course the territorial capital had been here. And the state, at first the legislature had used a little hall downtown, and then when Thurston County built the magnificent courthouse, the state actually took that over, bought it from Thurston County, added a couple wings, and now it's called the Old State Capitol, and they used that. And the state finally got some money again in the early 1920s. Started on this magnificent building, and of course the two young architects, Wilder and White from New York, were hired. And it was quite an interesting concept because it was going to be not just a Capitol building like so many of the states have, where the Supreme Court and the legislature and everybody's in one building, but it was going to be a Capitol grouping. So they actually built the Temple of Justice first. The governor's mansion was already here, and then the insurance building was up. And then they started on this particular building for the House and the Senate. And so it really became a grand plan, and that was beyond what any other state had done. If you look at capitals across America, and you look at domes across America, they seem to get bigger and bigger and bigger as you progress westward. You go to the old Capitol of Virginia, you go down to Williamsburg, the dome on the building is probably only about 8 or 10 feet high, a little dome up on top of the building. North Carolina doesn't even have a dome. A lot of those states, it just wasn't the thing to do. As these states moved westward, they wanted to prove their wealth. And they wanted to show those immigrants that they were well enough organized and they were wealthy enough, and they were, this was going to be a great place to live. My grandfather was an interesting guy. He immigrated from Scotland as a kid, and his first job was to take the stonecutter's tools into town on a pony every night and get them sharpened at the blacksmith shop. He had served his apprenticeship on a castle in northern Scotland, a little town called Beaulieu. He started when he was 12 years old. And when he was about 19 or 20 years old, he and a group of other guys just decided, let's go look at the world. And off they left for America. And they worked their way west, working on buildings, cutting stone and building buildings ahead of the railroad. After you pass your apprenticeship, you work doing this work for so many years, then you have made your mark. And you actually receive a mark as a stone carver, and that mark goes on all your tools. So every stone carver had a little individual mark. My grandfather's was an X with a little check on it. And then as they go through their career, when they carve a beautiful piece of stonework, they always put that mark somewhere out of sight. So I could actually take this building apart and tell you exactly which piece of the stone my grandfather worked on, because his mark will be on the back of each one of those. And you can tell who did which particular piece. Probably today he'd have to have 5 or 6 degrees in engineering and architecture, and of course they had none of that. They had a blueprint, they had a design, and they had a structural engineer. But these are stone-on-stone constructed buildings, and they really aren't much different than the same technology that started in the pyramids. They started cutting the stone in Tacoma several years before the building even started to go up. And then on this site, there was the remnants of a foundation from a capitol that had been started before the Depression of the early 1900s. And so they had to figure out how to work around that and to tear that out and then start to construct this building. The architect did a beautiful job on the moldings and the kind of the fancy work of the building. And what the architect did is there was a plaster company in New York, and they had plaster models made of what that particular stone was supposed to look like. And then they took those plaster models up on the scaffolding with them, and the stone carver would stand right next to the model, and they would be able to duplicate it right there and turn it into a beautiful piece of stone. People look at the capitals on the columns in the front of this building. They don't realize that those blocks went up there square. And they carved them down from square to into that beautiful, beautiful stonework. If you look at how the curvature of the dome above the drum of the building, where the dome curves up in the outer dome, you'll see that each one of those stones is cut geometrically smaller on all 4 sides as they went up. And that was all done by hand. And so it took real skill and real talent to do that. I look at these massive stones and I think about getting hurt or getting killed, and it was a different era. And so if a stone carver was injured severely or was killed, they would auction off their tools. And the other stone carvers were expected to pay exorbitant prices for those tools, so that there would be some sort of retirement fund or some sort of medical fund for that particular stone carver that had been injured, or his wife if he'd been killed. And it was not a pretty scene. It all sounds kind of romantic today, but when I look at his box of tools and I see the names of other stone carvers on tools, I think, oh, I wonder what happened to that particular person and how his family survived after he was gone, and so on. So it's a different world. The governor had supported the construction of the building, but the governor got in trouble. People, the editorial started to appear that the building was way too fancy and this beautiful furniture was way too expensive. And you know, it was beyond the realm of what anybody could understand in those days. I mean, you imagine in 1920, and most people didn't have a couch. And if somebody said, yeah, we're going to buy a couch and we're going to buy it from Frederick and Nelson, and it's going to cost $85. I mean, people couldn't comprehend that. And so the governor kind of switched gears, and he came out campaigning against the building. He actually put some furniture on a truck and went around the state, and some of the gold spittoons and so forth. But the building proceeded and was completed, and the furniture was purchased, and they wanted to make the building so nice that no one would ever think about lying or cheating or stealing in the building. And you know, I know we have our problems and I know we have our bad apples, but the fact of the matter is this is a building that's held in great respect by most people who serve here. And I think if we were just meeting just in some old building, there would be a lot of things go on that don't ever happen in this building. People tend to behave much better. They tend to be more respectful. People that come here to see their seat of government are held in awe by the building. And I think that's all part of the design, was to make sure that it was a place that everyone would respect and appreciate and admire. So as far as I'm concerned, it's held true.